I'm going to stop my share so that they can, and I'm going to also turn off my camera.
There I am. Oh, I can tell. Very good. Very good.
And I've got 7 o'clock if you want to.
Very good. Let me shrink up my document here so I can keep an eye on the chat at the same time. That way I won't forget to won't miss anybody. I know I understand why people have many, many screens because it's a lot to manage. Very good. All right, well, welcome everyone. And thank you very much to my first experiment with a virtual town hall. And thank you in advance to Emily Kilroy, who is leaving her children for a couple of hours to help us manage the technology here, representing the county IT staff and the public engagement office. And first off, some technical things. If you would like to ask a question, there are multiple ways to do that. If you are participating with Zoom, you can raise your hand and Emily will help me keep track. If you're participating by phone, press *9, and then that will show up on your sign in, and then she will be able to help push you through to the microphone. And also using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you have that available. We will try to manage all those things. I'm going to go through first the questions which have been sent in advance, and maybe some of those will address some that people have today. And then we will jump quickly to the ones who are on the machine today, on the meeting today. And I'm saving the master plan questions for the end because we will be having more meetings, especially on November 30th at 7, where we can discuss that in more detail. In case we run out of time, I want to save that one until last. So if we are set, and we have 58 people, spectacular, thank you all. I'm going to jump in now with just a little warm up on where we are this year. 2020 has been horrendous. I didn't get to do the spring town halls because we were on lockdown, and I'm so grateful to have a chance, even though it isn't face-to-face, to hear from so many of you this fall. And I do hope that next spring we will be back to face-to-face again, because I benefit so much from seeing you in person and hearing from you and seeing your earnestness about all of your ideas and concerns. It's very, very important. Another fact about 2020 has been that it has been torture for the budget. In the fall of 2019, the county staff and Board of Supervisors spent about 4 months getting the preliminaries to the budget worked on, the strategic plan, the priorities, the financial plan. And then we had a budget adopted and immediately had to throw it out. And in 4 weeks, county staff presented a completely pared down budget, which we finally adopted late in June. This resulted in 28 frozen positions and tremendous reduction in in-person operation. A grand percentage of our county staff has been teleworking the whole time. The DSS Department of Social Services, for example, 70% of their workers are teleworking, and the team of 10 comes in every day to do all the support work for those other 60 who are out on the road all the time. That's just an example of one department who is carrying on with their business and doing the public's work, even in this really different way of operating. I'm very, very proud that the county has managed so well to plan and distribute, plan to receive and distribute to businesses, to needy recipients, all sorts of federal assistance funds, and worked with the workforce department, with social services, with state, to be able to facilitate that distribution without setting up whole new hierarchies of bureaucracy. It's been terrific to have great partners in our community with whom we can work and who are very careful financial managers as well. And as all of you know, our master plan is well underway for Crozet. We are 5 years late, but it's never over until it's really done. So we are to the pre-draft stage now. There's a lot of really good detail work to be able to study, to ask really detailed questions about now, and the November 30th meeting will be very important to make sure that everyone has a chance to fully understand the consequences of some of the new concepts that are being proposed by staff to really deal with some unique issues and opportunities that Crozet has to preserve our older neighborhoods, to make sure we retain the affordable housing, which we are blessed to have now, as well as to create some small opportunities for new infill housing close into town. But that's sort of the very, very short version of the master plan. And I know that there are issues with neighborhoods, especially around the edge of the growth area, where they do not want to see increases in density. So we will be talking all about that on the 30th, if not before. I'll now do a couple of announcements. Some of our folks were not able to be here today. The first announcement is that the Crozet Tunnel, after 20 years of work, is opening on Saturday. And Nelson County has a website up where people can do a plan your visit link to be able to see exactly where to park and what to do. I cannot wait to be an able walker enough to be able to do the whole way through from east to west. I've only been in from each end and a little ways over the last 15 years. So this is a very exciting day and will provide a tremendous point of interest for hikers and walkers and bicyclers. The eastern entrance is all ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible. So I think that will provide a really broad base of experience and recreation for people. From Tavis Coffin, who is the captain in charge of our Western District for the Albemarle County Police Department, he has a conflict tonight and was not able to be there. But he wanted to share that the Albemarle County Police Department is working with community development to make sure that all of the officers get really up to speed on how they work with community development to address noise violations from wineries and the sort of agritourism type events. And that the police department does, of course, take care of enforcement for the nuisance noise ordinances always. And then there are certain places where it spills over into zoning when it has to do with these land use agritourism issues. But people are always encouraged to call the ECC non-emergency number at 977-9041 or 911 to report noise issues in their community. If this happens, please do not neglect to call, because having a paper trail to investigate is really important when I go out with staff to meet with operators at some of these businesses to help them to understand how important it is that they comply with our rules. This afternoon, as I mentioned, we had a very well attended in sort of changing groups of citizens in the West Hall and Foothills Crossing, Eastern Avenue, Brook Hill, Summerdene area about traffic, about cut through traffic, total neglecting of stopping at stop signs, and the danger that drivers in this area are bringing to the residents. I was shocked when I parked my car how many children were out on scooters and little bicycles there. It's a lovely neighborhood and it's very, very fully populated with young families. And it is really incumbent upon all of us driving everywhere in Crozet, but especially in these neighborhoods where the streets are so narrow and the population is very densely built in, that we all take our responsibility to protect everyone by driving the speed limit. And if somebody's pushing on your bumper behind, they can wait. But take back the road was a philosophy that we had in Earlysville back in the 1980s when people were speeding down Earlysville Road, and we all made a pact to drive 45, and that helped to make it safer for everyone. So I hope that each and every one of us will really do our part to help our neighbors. Orchard Road has another problem with cut through traffic and very high speed driving there. So let's all help each other out to make sure that we can be safe. Sergeant Easton and Lieutenant Randy Jamerson are working on enforcement in the Whitehall District. And I know Sergeant Easton said they had made 39 different traffic patrols in the West Hall area since September. So they're really trying to do their best to help us keep ourselves safe. And the also sort of proactive warning from the police department is residents should expect to see the typical pre-holiday car break-ins and thefts rash that we have had annually for decades. You are all reminded to lock your cars, make sure that valuables are inside the house or hidden from view, especially at night or while shopping in town. Locking your garages and sheds, especially at night, is also a way to protect your things. One friend had her husband's truck keys in her car. His truck was locked, hers was not. They took his keys out of her car and stole his truck. So we all need to make sure we're battening down the hatches here. And I think pre-holiday, this tends to happen a whole lot more. So what I'd like to do now is to jump on to start down my list of questions. These are in no particular order except the way they came in, except that I have bunched the master plan ones near the end. So we will go along here and see. I'm going to check. Okay. Speed. Okay, good. I got that. Then I will, uh-oh, technological problem, lost my screen. Here we go. So the first town hall question received was, what is the status of the local firearm ordinance? And from the county attorney, this ordinance, the authority to have an ordinance was approved by the legislature and took effect last July. And it will be coming to the board for consideration in January at the soonest. And so but work is being done to prepare that. And there will be the commensurate public outreach and public hearings on any proposed changes. But this is something which has been promoted by many residents all across the Whitehall district. And one of the items that we will be considering is different places of public owned spaces where firearms will not be permitted. And there'll be other issues as well. A second question is about Earlysville and poor internet and cell service. And this could just as well be Smith Road or Birches Creek or in many, many other places, both rural and in the growth area throughout the Whitehall district. And people are concerned about CenturyLink as a provider. They are not living up to their obligations. This mom says, I'm only 9/10 of a mile from the elementary school on a private road, and we have nothing. And the word from Mike Culp, who was our director of IT and the staff to the Albemarle Broadband Authority, is, and I've been pushing for several months now, to change the metric on which the way we're investing our tax dollars. Because previous to now, we have been providing money to the providers to buy down the cost of projects which they are offering to do. And there's also state matching money that we earn. And we have brought down millions from the state broadband fund, which is important to do for sure. But I think there's now becoming support to need to analyze a switch to a hybrid network ownership model. And Orange County Broadband Authority has taken the lead on this, right? Our next door county here. And this may result in some modifications in the ABA charter, but also allow the county to be more in the driver's seat about providing a guaranteed service to customers and then having the providers come in to provide the connection, but puts the county in a much more influential position. So while we don't have any immediate improvements on that right today, we do have work in progress through Dominion and CenturyLink and Central Virginia Electric Co-op where work is underway over the next many months to provide service to about 2,000 houses. So we are going along, creeping along on the broadband. The most painful consequence is for the person or the few houses who are just outside the area which has had new wonderful service provided for it. So for me, that is really going to be a focus for getting these sections done where we have gaps, because it is definitely not an equitable situation now to be someone a quarter mile away from people who are getting monstrously fast speed and your 3 children can't get their homework done. Another question that I received was about ranked choice voting as a way to try to reduce the sort of sense of division, which has been growing so much in our community. And from the county attorney, he has answered that the General Assembly adopted legislation for ranked choice voting during the 2010 session, and it will become effective July 1st, 2021, for a 10-year experiment. This will enable the election of members of county boards of supervisors and city councils to be elected by this method. And he provides a link, and all this printed material will be in the materials that go on record with this meeting tonight. Many, many questions were sent in about traffic and speeding and focused on the Dick Woods Road area between Ortman and the county line with Nelson because of the extra traffic involved in increasing numbers of agritourism businesses there. And the questions have been, how do we mitigate the impact of traffic that will be brought about by all these wineries' activities on this gravel section of Dick Woods Road? And I know that there has just recently been a speed study of that section of Dick Woods Road, and we have reduced the speed to 35 miles an hour. Signs were installed, so the entire gravel and the entire paved section from Ortman Road West is now just 35. And enforcement is going to be something we rely on the county police department to take up. Another question about agritourism and the southwestern part of the county: is there any way to go about directing or encouraging traffic to and from these wineries to come from 151, which is paved, as opposed to through Ortman and the gravel? And there is a signage program for tourist destinations that we are going to begin a process to see if we can get that direction to bring in tourists from 151 and not from the eastern side. And I will be assigned myself to get after VDOT and find out all the details about that process. I think that is such a good idea. And I think our drivers, our visitors from out of the area, would appreciate having a little smoother and safer, more ordinary type roads to drive on, rather than our beloved and gravel, but twisty, turny, and sometimes scary sections of Dick Woods. And someone else asked about getting a dead end road sign for Smith Road, and that is another thing down in that area. There is a whole program that the county can participate in to get a sign for a dead end, and that's something else I will be following up on, because it really helps to cut down on tourist traffic when people take the wrong turn and then think they're going to cut through and get out somewhere far enough. For several months, well, actually more than a year, there's been a discussion about the section of Route 250 beginning at Old Trail Drive and west to Yancey Mills and the Route 64 interchange, and how we can make improvements on that stretch. It generally has, the speed has been reduced from 55 to 45. It still feels way too fast, especially when there's lots of traffic going. According to VDOT, there is sufficient right-of-way that VDOT owns now in order to be able to widen or narrow the lanes and create a continuous turn lane with very careful painting in the center, so that the businesses on north and south of 250 would have designated places for their turn lanes. And that would also make it a little less chaotic than it is right now. I think this would be safer for the students, the young drivers in their first year or so of going to Western Albemarle, as well as the long experienced drivers to be able to navigate this area. There are also lots of businesses with heavy trucking, and we need to make sure that we are having the best facility we can along that area. Happily, there would not be right-of-way required. We are going to have to going through a study process for this, which is not on the list right now, but it's something I'm continuing to push for, because it's not fair to the businesses or the landowners in that stretch to stick each one of them with a very expensive turn lane, when this should be something VDOT does within the right-of-way to keep everybody safe. And we will hope that that will work. I've received many questions about Western Park. That was land that was donated to the 50 acres, which was donated by the original owners of Old Trail. And it has been a natural and rustic park. It has a lovely organic garden and trails and a very long stretch of Lick and Hole Creek, which goes right along there. And it has been waiting forever, since 2008, to get developed. And so I will update you that there are ongoing conversations. We have met 6 times in this past year with planning staff, finance staff, and the developer, and are identified financial resources, which the homeowners in Old Trail have already provided, from $1,000 per single family house down to $500 for smaller units. So there is a kitty of money to begin phase 1 of the project. And so the final determinations need to be made for exactly how the parking is going to be arranged and whether it will be attached to the street by the pool or whether it will be a self-contained pork chop type thing. So there are some details to be worked out, but believe it or not, we've actually made some progress on Western Park. And I think that that will help to get things going there. The highest priority at the beginning will be the parking and also the playground, because that's something that we've had lots and lots of concerns for. And then to be improving trails and having rustic climbing things along for the children too, and adults to use. Another question, going back to the, actually, I'm going to stop here for a second because the next question on my list is about the elementary school expansion. And I'm going to take this interval to update you on where the current budget preparations are for fiscal year 22, which will begin in July 1st of 2021. If you listen to the meeting from yesterday, the November 18th meeting of the Board of Supervisors, there was a strategic planning presentation and talked about the prioritized projects that I'm very hopeful will be able to be carried out with the funding as is already in our capital process. Each year, the county pays off some amount of debt from previous projects, older schools, things like that. Usually our projects are 10 or 20 years for our buildings. And I'm hopeful that we will generate cash from those payoffs to be able to therefore take on a moderate amount of debt in our capacity in order to be able to take some of the very highest priority items on the current CIP list. And I have not met with the school board. The school board needs to have their meeting in the next couple of weeks about prioritizing which of the school projects is still their highest priority. Last fall, in fall of 2019, when we met about this, the expansion of Crozet Elementary was the highest, and Kate Acuff on the school board just mentioned it at a meeting 2 months ago that she thought that CES was still the highest priority because the expansion there would allow then to also reduce some overcrowding, which exists at Brownsville. So that definitely is a high priority for all across the board. Several people mentioned that improving our facilities for our elementary students was of highest priority, even with the COVID pandemic, because those are the children who need to be back face-to-face absolutely as soon as possible. Whereas I know the school board has discussed in the past and has reported to the Board of Supervisors that they're always thinking about how education will be different in 10 years and will we be doing more independent learning and opportunities for online for older students. And it seems that the COVID pandemic has really accelerated all of those into active pilot projects. And I think this year the school board and their teachers have worked incredibly hard to be as successful as they possibly can for their students. I know there are many who have connection issues, and it's been a real challenge, I know, for my own grandchildren going to school from home. But we are all doing the very best we can to keep everybody safe. And this is one thing. But the good news for this discussion is that I think that the Crozet Elementary is very likely to be able to move forward. And I will certainly be throwing my push behind this because it is incredibly important for our community to have the increased school capability. And so let me make sure I didn't get that. The school facilities which would be lower in the priority would be those with very high additional operating costs. The operating costs, of course, affect our budget every year. If we expand programs and we have to hire people to do them, then that increases the cost base for the next year and on into the future. So we're looking for things now, such as expansion of a few classrooms does not require a whole new staff and everything else. It certainly requires some additional teachers and then transfer of some teachers perhaps from Brownsville. So that'll be a balance where Crozet Elementary certainly looks as if it's in a very good position going forward. We have been talking about climate and the changes in climate, and we've certainly seen firsthand outside our windows. I know in our farm we had 5 inches of rain a week for the last 2 weeks. And while the damage was not as bad as in May of 2018 when we had 11 inches in 6 hours, we are in a whole new world than I have ever known in the 70 years in which I've lived in this area. And so I'm very grateful that there are many, many people who are concerned about this around the world and certainly in our community. And so we are discussing on a regular basis ways in which we should keep in mind our impacts on all of these climate issues with all decisions which we make, especially if we're buying things. We should not be buying things through our procurement processes, which end up making it worse in monstrous ways, generating large amounts of trash, et cetera. But a citizen said, given the county's commitment toward climate change, should we have a tree or a tree canopy ordinance so we have less scorched earth development and have mature trees left after development takes place? This is a very poignant question, and there are many citizens who have spoken up about this because of the pain that has been felt by the neighbors along Park Road and in West Hall in the last year, where a lovely forest, where occasional 2-foot diameter trees could easily have been left standing, was just demolished. And then the most recent disaster where the buffer to the stream was completely obliterated and is now going to have to be all replaced and rebuilt at the expense of the developer over close to Crozet Park. So there has been, at least for 4 years, we have been asking about a tree protection ordinance. And there has been, we did some work in the General Assembly successfully last year. And I think we'll have to follow up again this year in the Assembly. And there was some kind of work that the Department of Forestry, State Department of Forestry was doing over the summer, which will impact on this issue. But I've been trying very hard to work directly with developers and really beseech them to change their demolish everything and make it a tabletop with plug in some new houses and tiny little trees. It's just not the same and not as good. And we certainly know that tree cover is incredibly important for our whole carbon sequestration idea. Let's see, let's go back to, okay, let's talk about broadband here for a little bit. The questioner, we had an Earlysville question. We also had a questioner down in the western part of Smith Road area. And this is an area on the border of where Central Virginia Electric Co-op and Dominion come together. And so this is an example of a neighborhood where they're Dominion customers, and yet CVEC has not gotten permission from their board of directors to expand into non-CVEC territory areas yet. And I can understand they feel an obligation to take care of their own their own clients first, but we are counting on them and will be participating with cost buy downs with them just as soon as they have the ability to expand their Firefly broadband into these sections of Dominion territory. There's also some land, so territory which Verizon has in the Greenwood area, the extension 456 and others, where these different overlapping territories make it difficult for the county to operate on an even basis. And it certainly puts the citizens very much at risk from not having equal services. Our county staff is also continuing to encourage Dominion Power to work with this on this area and to have fiber strung on their poles, as so many other utilities around the country are doing. And so I hope to have better news to present on this over the coming months. There's certainly proposals out there about that. Okay, I'm going to come to my master plan questions now. So let me stop and ask Emily to help us and see if there are any other questions different than what I've said that have come up. I see lots of things in the Q&A here. So let's see, okay. All right, I see the one here where it says the best way to get a speed study on Dickwoods. So I did not report that. The speed study on Dickwoods Road has been concluded, and the whole length was reduced to 35, even the paid section, and the signs were supposed to have been installed. So if you see that signs were not installed, please let me know so that I can pursue that. And another question about the potential closure of Browns Gap Turnpike for work done at the Beaver Creek Reservoir. This is of great concern to many residents, both at the far west, north end of Browns Gap, as well as the farms and neighborhoods to the southern end closest to the Meachams River. The federal government has changed the impact area along the Meachams River at the outfall of Beaver Creek, and required that the dam and its facility be able to have a much higher flood capacity than it had before. And I think this is based upon what they expect with these more ferocious storms coming along with climate change. But the impact on this reservoir means that the dam has to be raised in height, and it has to have a much greater spillway capacity and overflow spillway capacity as well. Currently, that little flattened area to the east of the dam, east of the water and just west of the boathouse, is where the floodwater would go up and over a lower place on the dam and go around. That is not deemed to be sufficient. And so that is why all this work is being done. And the plans for the dam have been sent to the Army Corps of Engineers, who has to evaluate which alternatives for keeping traffic moving they will permit. If a bridge is to be reconstructed in the area of the old road, which is down to the south of where the dam is now, and perhaps the old piers might be able to be used, then that will be one alternative to be considered. And we're still too early in the process to know what really bona fide costs would be to do that alternative. I do know that it's much, much faster to close a road and get it done than it is to try to keep one lane open and have flags, and therefore then all the machinery is always moving out of the way. So we will have to get lots more work, but I certainly am aware of the concerns of the neighbors there about the extended EMS time delivery, and also for the milk truck and the other farmers who need to get access to that area. But we just don't have enough information yet in order to be able to have an answer for you today on that one. Another question is, what is the part of the budget which is most impacted by the pandemic? The part that is the taxation based upon sales tax, meals tax, anything but property tax on residential has seen a reduction in receipts and value. We will not know until January what the impact will be on the commercial real estate property or the final assessment report for residential. But the residential market has remained incredibly hot, according to our real estate people. So that, I think, anticipates that those values will stay pretty current. But the concerns about the value of commercial and how it is impacted by so many closures is the uncertainty. Albemarle County is better off than many communities where they have had so much of their value and their budget based upon the sort of entertainment and restaurants and sort of recreation, those quality of life things. But those are the monies that go the first, because those people have to be paying rent and buying groceries. And if they don't have money to go out to dinner, that's lower down on their priority list than the other more life-threatening issues. So that is still uncertain. But what the impact in Crozet is the impact on potential capital improvement programs that we talked about a little bit earlier. So getting the work done started at Crozet Elementary, and also absolutely the highest priority for bricks and mortar on roadways is the completion of the bridge between Quarry Farms and Westlake for Eastern Avenue, because having that additional north-south route to the east of downtown will be incredibly important for getting public safety vehicles from the firehouse and the rescue squad south to those customers on the south side, but also allow many more choices as people choose to move around through the growth area. And the good news about the Eastern Avenue Bridge is that the county has put in its own earnest money, which I was able to get to happen last year in 2019. And the engineering, preliminary engineering, a final determination of where the exact site for the bridge would be is now nearing completion. I'm supposed to hear an update from this in late December or early January. And at that point, then there will be a much more bona fide cost. We were arguing with VDOT about what the cost of the bridge was going to be, which really challenged our ability to get revenue sharing dollars assigned to that bridge. But that is a tremendously high priority for the safety of the community. It would also allow people to walk and bike across Lick and Hole without having to have the switchbacks that a trail that has been under consideration by the Crozet Trails crew for years would require in order to have it able to be used. The next question on our question and answer is, what is rank choice? So rank choice voting is an opportunity where, in addition, if there are several candidates, a voter may choose their first choice and their second choice and their third choice. And this allows many more different elimination of candidates if there are several, or I think has a different outcome than if it's just the A or B or C, winner take all. And I think some different states have different approaches to do that. And I don't have all the details about it, but it is expected, it was certainly expected to be able to facilitate voting and elections in a positive way. But I will have to learn more about that and report more back to you as I understand it, as our pilot is developed. Someone in Whitehall is saying, how can we get cell service out here? Very good question. What I have been told directly by cell service purveyors is that their business is to make money. They have been told that if there isn't a density of customers to allow them to easily make money, then that is not a high priority place for them to invest. My work, I've been also focused on the General Assembly and the leadership in state government, because these companies are, and oftentimes they're privately owned, but they're utilities. They're providing utility-based service, as Ma Bell used to do. And when one was a monopoly company, you had all sorts of obligations to provide service to people in an equitable way. And certainly for our broadband and internet service, we have no choices. In Northern Virginia, they may have 5 or 6 providers, but in many, many parts of Albemarle, they don't have any potential providers, much less more than one. So it is a difficulty in our areas where we are having the beautiful countryside that many of us appreciate living out in the country. But that has been our difficulty with getting cell companies to come. We have many, many towers that are put up with only a building permit as their requirement, because they're able to easily meet the requirements that for our wireless ordinance. And sometime in the next year or so, the wireless ordinance, which is now 10 years old, or 15 years old, will be analyzed to see if there are changes in it that need to be made. But several times a year, we have public application processes for cell towers but they so far this year have been all along our main roads, from Greenwood to right by Fox Chase in the middle of Crozet. And there were 2 towers approved within the last 2 years out near Whitehall Village. And I do not know if either one of them has actually been built. So there are many which have been approved. There were a half a dozen which were approved along Route 20 between Charlottesville and Scottsville that were never constructed. So that is something where these companies are making those kinds of decisions. But I will try hard to find out more information about that as well. And I agree with you completely when you say about high speed. Many of us in the county who are counted as served with broadband do not, we get our broadband or our internet through our telephone. And so many of us have a failing landline company who does not even support their telephone service. And so when our telephones are down, as they were all day yesterday, and any time that it rains, then that means the internet goes as well. Or the hum is so loud on the phone that one can't hear who is calling. So, okay, I need to fix my camera, sorry. There we go, sorry. Thank you. So those are the dilemmas when there are many, many things where we don't have enough direct control and we're trying to figure out ways to leverage to get better service from these companies. How much revenue does the county receive each year from the wine and beer tourism industry? That I do not have right in front of me, but I will dig around in my, go back to this question later because I do know that Bettina Ring, when she was just speaking at the Kelly Turkey Place a couple of weeks ago, talked about what the tourism industry throughout the state is number 3. Agriculture and forestry is number 1. But as far as the wine and beer industry in Albemarle County, I do not have a dollar figure for that. It seems they're given latitude by the board. And grants, no, lack of oversight. So let me give you a little explanation about the farm wineries and what kind of extra leverage they do have. Because beginning in 2015, there was legislation passed in the General Assembly which gave allowances to vineyards and who became wineries and made their wine on the premises to be able to then host events as accessory to their winemaking. And this is a state legislation. There have been different iterations of control. The counties originally had much more control than they do now. And then the industry went back to the legislature in 2018 and 19. And there were changes to the legislation so that we are not able to have regulations up to affect the growing, producing, and or anything having to do with wine tastings on the properties. We are allowed to be able to have regulations for events over 200 people because that is determined to be something that will affect the health and safety of the community. That's been our angle, our lever on that situation. So I agree, there is a lot of a dependence upon the neighborliness of the operators of these businesses as to whether they are successful and good neighbors or whether they do not understand yet their obligations to their neighbors. And there's a wide range of behavior throughout the 15 wineries in the Whitehall district as far as the way they operate, with some exemplary and a few that are awful. And so we will continue to work with those who are awful and try to get them to comply and understand their obligation. One alternative that the Board of Supervisors has is to prohibit all outdoor amplified music, period. And that has been a option, which I have explained very carefully to some of our operators who have not cared at all about the impact on their neighbors. And so far it has helped to bring them into a little more respectful behavior. But we take that one day at a time and work very carefully with our zoning staff and our police department to try to implement our enforcement absolutely as well as we can. All right, let's see. Uh-oh, where'd it go? There it is. Okay. What is the planned status for the Downtown Crozet Initiative project? So the Downtown Crozet Initiative, or DCI, is a group of residents, and they're self-organized and to rally support for businesses in Crozet and to encourage activities that will help Crozet as a town to thrive. And they are not funded by the county. And what they have been supportive of, and you may be thinking of here, is the JB Barnes redevelopment project, which is on the 19 acres of the old lumber yard, parallel just south of the tracks. And that project is fully approved and has been spending the last 18 months getting its road plan adopted through VDOT. I understand 2 weeks ago that that process was finally nearing an end. And so there were some technical things which had to be worked out, and it took a very long time to get get the highway department to understand the needs of an urban community as opposed to a place where there were wide streets and high-speed traffic. So I think that has made great progress. The community asked for, and the developers committed to, working on phase 1, which is the western third of the property from the square a little bit eastward. And there would be a plaza about a half an acre on the high ground where the concrete and the pillars are right now, which will be a community open space. And there is a county tax program committed to that plaza, where they will be paid for by the increase in revenue from the businesses that are built in the project. It's called the TIF. And that will help to provide some funds to carry out the construction of the plaza and help it to come into fruition much sooner. So having been 5 years and more in the making, I think we are really nearing the end of the planning process for JB Barnes. And so that's a really exciting process. Okay. And someone writes about, are we considering more modifications to the homestay rules to make them more homeowner friendly and pro-tourism? And we will be back to an April update again to see, we had a meeting in the fall were we ready to allow more flexibility in certain areas and fewer permits in other areas for waivers and things. And the majority of the board said they wanted more time to have people coming in. And so that's where it sits right now. I do understand we have many wonderfully successful operations, especially in downtown Crozet and then out in the countryside as well. And I so appreciate the offerings that these homeowners are doing. And we have just taken a very careful approach, and I think have found somewhat of a compromise. I don't think homeowners think it's as friendly to them as it should be, but we are trying to be very careful because the homeowner requirement is incredibly important in order to make sure that we are not just having our housing stock purchased up by investors who turn them into these short-term rentals. And that really devastates neighborhoods and has been seen to do that in other places. So we are admittedly being very, very careful, but the spring again will bring us another analysis of that, and we will consider at that point if we need to take off some of these requirements for waivers for perhaps additional bedrooms and things. If we can develop some checklists and criteria, which will be easy enough for staff to interpret. It is really important that we not put our county staff in a position of making policy, because that's not fair to them, and it's certainly not fair to the applicants. We want to have the rules be the rules, and we do our very best to make sure that they're as fair as they can be and as clear as they can be. Okay, hold on 1 second. Yes. The next question is there a plan to slow down the residential development of Crozet? When we finally fix the school capacity issue, we're right back in it because of continued growth. I agree that there has been absolutely overwhelming growth in the Crozet area. When we were out in West Hall today, walking along, I made a comment to a staff member that we were drowning in our own success. Beautiful scenery, friendly people. And when the growth area was created in 1980 out here, I think it was 10 years, and land was changing hands without people really knowing. So that by the time things began to be built in the early 90s, things were socked away already. And it was a big shock to the community that it was going so fast. We had a little breather during the recession in 09-10, but those plans did not go away. From 2004 to 2008, there were over 4,000 housing units which were approved for Crozet. That was the main reason that I won the election in 2008, was because of the rubber stamping of every rezoning application that came along, because the will of the board at that time was just to pack in as many people as possible. And I've never thought that was a good idea, because if we don't have growth areas, which are wonderful places in which to live, then no one will want to live there, and our experiment in that will have failed. So there was also a very strong commitment at the time, back in the early 2000s, for the county to be providing infrastructure, those sidewalks and bridges and street connections that are essential in order for these extra 4,000 people, or 8,000 people is what it is now, because we're now close to 10,000 people and we were about 2,000 back then, to be able to function, and our community to be able to function without tremendous overcrowding. We have many, many small and manageable, but not yet done transportation projects which will make a big, big difference. We looked at a bunch of them this afternoon about street connections. The project at Old Trail Drive and 250 needs lane changes and ways in which we can accommodate much higher capacity without building a lot of things. We just need to get to do it. And so there are many, many things which are in process, and they definitely don't go fast enough from my perspective. And so the answer to the question is quality of life of the community is incredibly important to the residents here. And we have not solved that problem, because many of the board members are very happy to vote for all the rezonings that they can out here. It was a miracle that the Sparrow Hill 93 units was defeated, but it took a 3-3 vote. It should have been 6-0 defeat, but it was a 3-3 defeat. So now there are 30 some houses in there, which is compatible with Corey Farm and much more compatible with the traffic which already exists on 250. That's just one small example. Who at the county is responsible for the project to put sidewalks on Tabor High and Hilltop? That has been in our capital improvement program for at least 8 years. We had it on our plan to be funded with revenue sharing this year, and was applications were sent in last fall to the VDOT revenue sharing program. And just a week and a half ago, I received the bad news from the county staff that VDOT had notified them that the money for this project was not going to be available because of the changes in the state budget because of COVID, and the county would have to be paying for it. So we are not able to proceed with that one immediately this year, but it is incredibly important to do. It is very tricky to do because it will require lots of right-of-way donation from people along the streets because the highway, the VDOT right-of-way only goes to the edge of the pavement on all of those streets. And we need to remember that's going to probably, as it did on Jarman's Gap, end up cutting down a whole lot of trees. And that is always a terrible shock when people remember what Jarman's Gap used to look like with those huge shade trees all the way along. And then we found out when people wanted to go plant new trees, they found out that there was all the utilities underground there. And so they weren't allowed to plant any of the trees along Jarman's Gap. So the sidewalks on Tabor and High and Hilltop are definitely important and will become even more so as time goes on. I think that I hope will be some trail connections through the park and also the improvements through the JB Barnes property, which will provide alternatives for people and make it much safer for the neighbors in these streets to move around. But I have heard a lot over the last week from residents along in there who definitely feel as if they've been trodden upon, and they have, because back in 2006, when West Hall was approved and started, that's where all the traffic went, was up Tabor and High and down Park Road to get to all that construction traffic. The goal really has been to provide many different outlets for people to travel. So the Eastern Avenue is another north-south. Extending Library Avenue all the way to Foothills Crossing will be incredibly important in order to be able to give people another east-west to get to, in addition to 240 and 250. And while the people in West Hall are justifiably concerned about what's going to happen when the bridge gets built and that connection to 250 is made, as with good enforcement and many alternatives, it's going to be really important that we have a slow speed, good connector there as well. Okay, let us see. Let's move on to Free Union and Boonsville Road. Oh, good. So there are several spots on Free Union Road and Boonsville Road that need repair. All right, so Marty, if you would send me some location details, I will get Carrie Shepard out there. We will either meet you or I will take her out there to look at them. And that's been the most effective method that I have found to get her focused on what needs to be done. We've done a lot of work on Clark Road and Browns Gap this past year earlier. So we will put our masks on and get out there and have a look. So thank you very much on that. How can we get infrastructure investment in older neighborhoods, older streets? I agree. And Lower St. George. All right, so this is definitely a situation where the neighborhoods that have been the backbone of the community for 50 to 100 years have been left behind in improvements as the gallop to put in all these new neighborhoods has happened. And I don't have a magic answer for you on that, but I think it's incredibly important, and I will put that on my to-do list as well. And please help me to identify a location that we might go after for the pocket park, because this is good input from the neighbors is the very best way to gather that information. Okay. Aha, okay, it sounds like the next question identifies it, but whoever this is, please send me some more details and an email or telephone, and I will be glad to follow up on that. Let's see. If there will be delays on infrastructure improvements to supporting services like schools, whether improving housing goals are greatest. Okay, so we do not have the authority in Albemarle County because we are what's called the Dillon Rule state, and we can only do what the General Assembly says we can do within certain parameters. We do not have the authority to say no to a zoning application based upon the fact that we don't have the money to provide the bridges, sidewalks, and streets that development needs. As something that communities across the state have been asking for 30 years, it is something that other states, Maryland, New Jersey, other places, have as a given. And their developers have been very successful for generations, making valid contributions. We had a neighbor who used to be in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, and he said, if we put in a 300-unit neighborhood, we had to build a school and pay for the teachers for 10 years. But that is a substantial investment to go along with the neighborhood. But that possibility of that does not exist in Virginia now. So we do, as I said, we do not have the ability to deny based upon that. For 12 years, we had a proffer system, which meant that if a rezoning was being requested, so that instead of 1 house per acre, people were asking to put in 4 or more, and a rezoning was what allowed Old Trail to be built, for example, then the developer would offer voluntarily to do certain things, X, Y, Z, to offset some of these impacts of all of these new 500 or 1,000 houses on the existing community. 2 years ago, the legislature threw out the ability of the counties to do that anymore. Then last year in 2019, there were some minimal improvements made, but we have not been able to return to the pre-2017 state where we have bona fide contributions from our developers to offset their impacts. So that is a sad answer to say, no, we don't have the ability to do that. Let's see. Moving on to Tabor High and Park roads and construction traffic, I saw dozens and dozens of dump trucks this afternoon, as did county staff and as did the police department, going up Park and High and Tabor on the way to Westlake and West Hall. And we have got to figure out a way to get those heavy equipment things in other ways. And I don't have an answer to that right now. Okay. Let's see, where's Leah's gone here? All right, so it says, explain factors that play into the granting of exemptions to establish zoning restrictions and planning regulations. Master plan doesn't do any good if all we have to do is ask for an exemption. Okay, well, there are, under our zoning, we have certain things which are allowed by right. And so those have no permits. There are other things, activities in certain zones, whether it's a commercial zone or a residential zone, that might be permissible under certain circumstances, depending on the impact and what's proposed. And therefore those might be proposed and approved under a special permit. And that may be what you're referring to. I'm sorry, I'm not able to follow up with you, Leah, on this. So please send me more email and I'd be glad to share it and then share the answer with others. And then for rezoning, that is when there's a big change proposed to the density usually, and therefore a whole thorough analysis is done about the need for it. But I do agree that residents, the quality of the neighborhood is an incredibly important thing as far as when we look at the whole scope of things. I am much more interested in making sure that the quality of life of our current residents is protected than I am in galloping into some future adventure to bring in 5,000 new houses as was originally proposed for Biscuit Run, and thinking that we're going to somehow come out better for it with a little land for a school and a firehouse. So I tend to be much more conservative about things like that. I do think that you may be right that the people with residences feel more controlled than people in commercial, but that's the best I can do on that particular one at the moment. Okay. All right, this is as far as this, for the size of the community and all the 725 square miles for Albemarle County and the growth areas that were named here, Crozet, Northern, Keswick, Pantops, the southern and western neighborhoods. Are we going to increase the staff of the county police department and other emergency services to provide adequate response times? I will say that we have done a really good job in the last 12 years to increase the police numbers. And the first 3 years I was on the board, the police chief at the time requested 4 new officers every year, and the majority gave them none. And then we began to make some progress when Steve Sellers was appointed. He helped the board understand how important it was to have officers, the geo-policing or community policing, the old cop on the beat plan, so that the officers would become basically long-term assigned to their patrol district and really have a chance to get to know their citizenry. But to do that requires many more staff than what the previous regime had put in, where there were basically 8 officers on duty on a shift in the entire county. So it was no surprise back in the 80s and 90s that we had a really, really long wait, and people would generally call the state police if they really needed some help. So I am very proud of the fact that I have voted for tax increases over the years because we needed it to hire more police staff. I have also fanatically in support of our volunteer fire departments and the service that they provide to our communities, and save, in addition to their wonderful sort of the culture of volunteerism in our county, which is incredibly important to residents, that the cost to replace them with paid county staff would be astronomical. And so we have had to hire a dozen fire rescue staff to provide service at Scottsville and Stony Point this year, where there was not daytime service available. A full-time service, actually, 24/7 in Scottsville, because the rescue squad closed down there. So we have incrementally certainly increased the staff needed and available for our police department in a bigger way, and our fire and rescue departments for the county staff. And I do understand it is incredibly important that we do have adequate response times, especially in our growth areas where the numbers, the expectation in our comp plans is for about half the time for response time in our growth areas as it is out in the country. And I live a long way out of the country, and I would never expect the policeman or the fireman to get there in 5 minutes. But if you live in downtown Crozet, it's highly likely that you will get that service because of the proximity of the officers and of the fire and rescue folks. But we talked earlier about the bridge over Eastern Avenue and how important that bridge over Licking Hole Creek is to be able to get our fire engines and rescue squads to the southern part of the community without having to fight the traffic and the bridges and the detours around to get through only Crozet Avenue or down to the depot or down to the trestle. All right. Let's see. The signs are up on Dickwoods Road. Thank you for that report. That's great. So signs are not working. All right. You just reported it. So I will follow up on that with VDOT, and we'll get the people, the sign contractor who installed the signs in Earlysville. It took them about 6 weeks, unfortunately, to get out and do the repairs to the ones that we had put up here. So I will get that to Carrie Shepard and have her check on those and see. And I have stood beside the road on Dickwoods Road to see the parade of construction workers coming in from 151 at 8 o'clock in the morning just a month or so ago. So I'm well aware of that. And that's part of that impact of the agritourism and the construction that has on all of our rural neighbors. And we're trying to figure that out. At what point can we expect to have sidewalks and bike lanes from the Highlands to downtown Crozet? I'm going to say at least 5 years, unless we can get donated right-of-way when the Acme property redevelops, which I hope is within the next couple of years. The final remediation will be finished, and that is a prime property for employment. It will be a prime property to make that northern connection of Eastern Avenue all the way to Three Notched there. And that will be a perfect opportunity when that is redeveloped to get some sidewalks and things there. In the meantime, every time I drive down that road, I think we have got to figure out a way to get something, some kind of cinder trail or whatever, up next to the fence, or to get our bicyclers and our pedestrians away from that high-speed street. But there is nothing in the budget right now for that project. As in many other cases, it is being built a little dribble at a time as projects are developed. Okay. Aha, okay. Kathy Rash, I will call you back, or you call me. Thank you very much. Oh Lord, okay. Sometime we've been working on the drainage on Clark Road, and we need to do some more. So I will get back in touch, or you get in touch with me, and we will report that to Carrie. Thank you very much. Okay, from Edward Howell, if you're going to answer Q&A for the prayers. Okay, well, I did go through the prior sent-in questions already before I went to the question. So please put if it has been missed, I hope that you will send it again. And I will check my email right now and see if there are any more that have come in that way. I do not see any in my email right now, so I'm sorry if you did not hear me answering your question. All right, the question about Whitegate Farm, one of the proposals is very similar to Wickham Pond. That is a long way from approval. The owners of the Whitegate Farm, the inheritors of it, asked it to be reconsidered as part of the master plan, and that is where the process is at the moment. And someone has come up with a plan for redevelopment, but it has not, I have not received it, seen it, or it has not begun the process. So I have no answers or details about that. The density of the master plan has already been approved. Okay. Can I pledge that I will adhere to the density level of the master plan and has it already been approved? I think it is far better. I do not support any increases in density unless it is for very particular situations. And the one example that I think is very successful and was supported by the neighbors was Bamboo Grove, a small piece of property. They wanted to build small houses, which because they were small houses would be more affordable for people. The zoning only allowed 6 and they asked for 9 and they were approved. That scale of increase in density, I think, is useful and does provide units of the type that we need. I do not support, I did not in any of the approvals which have come forth in the last applications, support going from 30 to 93, for example, out on 250, was something I worked very hard to defeat. And so I think that we have a long way to catch up on our infrastructure and the promises which have already been made for previous decades to the residents of Crozet before lots more density is approved. I'm happy to report that the approval, even though it looks as if Old Trail is very, very crowded now compared to what some people thought it was going to be, when it went into its rezoning meeting in 2004 or 5, it was 800 houses. And 4 hours later, when it came out of that meeting, it was 2,200 houses. And now the applicant, thankfully, has reduced the number that they expect their minimum to be about 1,000, of which about 650, I think, are planned at this point. So that at least is a much more moderate number than we were originally fearful of. From Susan, is the Whitegate project in front of the Western Ridge a done deal? And the answer is no, it is not a done deal. It has not even begun the process yet. So there is lots of time to be engaged about that. The November 30th discussion about the master plan would be a good time to attend. There will be a Zoom meeting about that as well. And then there will be, of course, a rezoning and public hearings at the Planning Commission and the board. So you will hear lots more about that as that comes forward. Let's see, Crozet Community Park in the process of expanding the facility up to 47,000. Are we going to address the Park Road issue? Gosh, I hope so. This is part of this whole prioritization that also has to happen for all of those neighborhoods listed here: Parkside Village, West Hall, Westlake, Foothill Crossings, and Corey Farm. And it's what we were having the meeting about today. So this is definitely a focus for several different county departments and VDOT to solve some of these problems for all these interconnected neighborhoods. Connectivity among different neighborhoods is seen as a very good thing. It would be great for someone in far Westlake to be able to bicycle with their children up to Crozet Park. But the way the traffic is cutting through there now at high speed and neglecting to stop at stop signs, it is dangerous. So we have a long way to go to get our community to comply with driving safely and treating each other decently. And that's going to be everybody's job here. In addition to the streets and sidewalks, the behavior of our drivers is something we all can take on when we see it. Thank you. Let's see. So the Board of Supervisors cannot deny zoning improvements, but do they have to approve all the high density changes as it appears? No, they do not have to. Absolutely, they do not have to. And thankfully, some of them have been denied. Can developers build by right? Yes, they can. Foothill Crossing was built by right because the houses are on whatever the zoning was. I think it's 2 lots, 2 houses per acre or half-acre lots, which is what was allowed in the zoning. So they just did a site plan there, and they had to build all the roads, everything else, but they did not have to go through a rezoning process, which they would have had to do in order to put the density up to have townhouses over that whole area, which was something that was actually considered and included in the 2005 master plan, believe it or not, the one that planned for 25,000 people in the Crozet growth area as build out. Thankfully, the 2010 master plan brought that number down to 16,000, and that's where we're trying to hang on to right now for the update. And I agree with you that back in the 1980s and 90s, long-timers criticized me and saying, you just want to shut the door and not let anybody come, because I was very concerned about growth in general over all of the county, overwhelming our ability to provide services and schools and to not have the natural resources completely obliterated. And now it is interesting how things go full circle, because those same folks all these years later are saying, why did you let all these people come here? And my answer is, let's remember our earlier conversations. I really tried, and I will continue to try. But there are different perspectives on the board. One of 6, I need allies. I need 2 other people to join me to stop something. And I'm working very hard at improving my skills of persuasion in order to be able to achieve that. A 3-3 no is as good as a 6-0 no. So we have an area that is perceived by some as being entitled and rich, and it doesn't matter. We don't need protection out here. We have a very diverse community. We have very diverse opinions about everything all across the political spectrum. And we need to continue to work together to represent ourselves and to stand strong and protect our community. But it is a challenge for all of us, all homeowners and residences and business owners as well. Okay, let's see. Let's jump down to Rebecca here. How will the downtown overlay preserve historic buildings? I agree, the language we need to work on this language. My understanding when it was first proposed months ago was that the whole point was that the original homes would not be torn down. And if there was a large lot with a smaller house and a little accessory unit could be built there, that might be something that would be allowed that is not allowed today. So we do have work to do, and please continue to make your voice heard about this, because we do not want any potential where a bunch of houses can be torn down and a great big complex built. That is not what this is supposed to be for. We do not have a historic preservation ordinance in Albemarle County. There have been citizens who have been working on this for 30 years. We had not even, the last time it was tried was back in 2009 or so, and we were not even able to get protection for the bare minimum of requiring documentation before something is torn down. So I think the preservation, just the effort that the community made to even participate in the development of the downtown Crozet Historic District, for example, and all the details that are provided about all those structures has provided such incredible value to our community and our sense of place. So we need to treasure that and to work together to make sure that we're keeping it successful. Okay, let's go down to the next one here. This says, due to growth, Wars is needing a new squad house for generations has been supportive of residents of Crozet. Yes, yes, hooray. Okay. Where'd you go? What will be done to encourage new residents who haven't supported Wars and CVFD to with volunteer hours and financial contributions to start supporting? Wow. Well, I love the idea of developers and new residents should be funding the new squad house. And I think that both agencies have done spectacularly well at outreach. All neighborhoods could do better. And I think I will turn this around to say, I invite and encourage HOAs and neighborhoods to to use this focus to support, to have at your summer barbecue, invite a member of or some members of the emergency services departments to your barbecue to explain about being a volunteer, and to invite your members, your residents, neighbors to participate. The thing about being a volunteer rescue person or a firefighter is they often go in families because someone got hooked, their grandfather got hooked, and they grew up in the firehouse or the squad house, and they wanted to do it since they were 2, and now they're 42 or 52 or 62. And so getting that new generation of people in there who did not have the opportunity to have that childhood is really, really important. So I love the idea of developers and new residents supporting them. I think they do somewhat now, but we can always do better. And we have had dances in support of them in the past and hope to do that again, and band performances and all sorts of things at Crozet Park. So all these things we can look forward to as we get back to whatever our new normal is. But I really encourage all of the different neighborhoods to think about what you individually can do to help to support our agencies as well, because it's up to us to keep them going. I do not have the courage to be a firefighter, but I could be trained to drive an ambulance. And I think there are roles for everybody, no matter what your skill or age, to be able to participate with the agencies and to help them out in lots of different ways. So I encourage everyone to think about ways to do that. And let's talk some more about that idea. Let's see. Background of how the progression of the proposed Whitegate Village has changed from the original, whoops, where'd you go? Come back here. Original owners deeming the green space. Okay, so Whitegate Village was on the original map in 2005 and 2010. The zoning map had it as green space because it has a stream going through the middle of it. But in effect, that was basically taking the property from the owners. The owners didn't call it green space, the county called it green space. And that seems a little unfair. So the proposal in the master plan returns some ability to the owners to be able to develop some of it in some way, not yet determined, while the stream and the stream buffers are identified and excluded from any of that development on the map. So that is, and the owners had every right to ask, and they have asked, the community has spent a lot of time discussing this and come up with wide ranges of ideas. Some thought it would be a great place for a bungalow court and have a cluster of small houses in there and make a wonderful neighborhood with paths over to Wickham. Others thought it should be more dense and have some business in there. So there's still a wide range of ideas and many opportunities to help that come to resolution as the process November 30th, and then the Planning Commission and the board later on in the winter will help to nail down those details. But that was a clarification that had to happen. And I haven't seen a question here yet, but I'll address it. On their neighbors also on 250 in the Brownsville area who are concerned about what they perceive to be an upzoning of their area to make it more developable. And they don't want that because they're a secluded neighborhood of larger lots and they don't want it to change. So these are all ways that we need to continue to get our words in there on these upcoming meetings to make sure that this plan comes out as well as we should. The Brownsville Loop area is another one where the segregating the property which is stream impacted and therefore excluded, and only certain areas where there currently is development already are the ones which are shown as developable. When questioned about this earlier, the county staff did not think there was really any increase in density being proposed there, but we do need to discuss it to make sure that the owners and the residents there do understand. Let's see. Aha, okay, so clarification on this Dickwoods Road, the signs may be there, but nobody's paying attention. So that was going to be an enforcement issue and we're gonna have to figure that out. I may have mentioned this already tonight, but I may not have. For several years, I've been working with legislators, and we'll be meeting with our legislative representatives tomorrow afternoon by Zoom to work on our legislative program. But I know it sounds off the wall, but I think the only way we get control of our driving, wild drivers, and this is a concern that citizens throughout the county, all 6 districts, urban, rural, everybody, is completely done with people speeding, driving recklessly, plowing down fences and mailboxes, and the great fear of being run over on a bicycle or having your child chase a ball and get run over in the road. So the ability of the county to be able to use cameras for speeding and sending tickets in the mail, as they're done in Washington, D.C., Maryland, many, many states around this country and in many, many countries around the world, brings people into compliance pretty quickly. There is no way that we will have enough police officers to be guarding and watching. And our speeding has become so much more rampant in the last couple of years that this is the only solution that I have thought of as a way to get things, bring a little peace and quiet to the valley here. Let's see, what's Rebecca have to say? How will the downtown overlay preserve historic buildings? I think we did that already. Okay. Have you heard anything about a brewery venue at Pounding Creek and Dick Woods Road? No, I have not. I've only heard about the one at Hillcrest, which is west on Dick Woods, west of Ortman. Okay, so I don't have any answer on that one. Are you aware of any discussions with Nelson County Fire about mutual aid in the western end? Okay, no, but I will ask our fire chiefs about the coverage on the western end and find out what's going on with that. And Rockfish Fire is much closer, but gets no call. All right, that's a very, very good question. Thank you. How do we persuade other supervisors to slow growth? I think outreach to all the supervisors and sharing your views is really important. And you may send them to everybody, bos@albemarle.org, because now it used to be 5 years ago, it was only Crozet which was concerned about this. But now the folks in the Rio district on Rio Road are being faced with 400-unit apartment buildings here and there and everywhere. The people on Pantops are overrun with traffic and standing in traffic lines for much, much longer than they ever did. I mean, an hour from Glenmore to the bridge is an outrageous amount of time to sit in traffic on a regular basis. So I think there's a much greater awareness now on the part of all the supervisors that we have to do a better job. And so I hope that you will help me to carry this message forward. Thank you. Okay, and what are the best ways the community can advocate, protect our Crozet community from overdevelopment? So definitely get or stay involved in the master plan. In addition to the planning meetings here in the village and in the town, then the planning commission will have a public hearing, and then the board of supervisors will have a public hearing. We need, I hope to get the changes made that the community needs before the draft gets to the planning commission. So that it's, because I think that's the easiest time to get those changes adopted. But being involved, using your voice is really important, and letters to the editor of the progress in the paper and coming to meetings. Despite the misery that the virus has brought upon the world, being able to have these virtual meetings and having people be able to participate by telephone if they do not feel comfortable on a computer has improved the ability of so many more people to participate and to hear for themselves the discussions and the debates. So I really want to have this opportunity continue even when things are back to normal and we can have meetings in person. I still want to retain the ability of someone who cannot get there to feel that their citizenship and their voice is equally important. So we will work on that. What you just said about Brownsville residents not understanding is absolutely not true. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Diggins or Ms. Diggins, I don't mean to brush you off, but I was representing what the staff said if we need to get this worked out. The greenways in the Brownsville area were delineated and therefore not developable, the areas around the streams with the buffers. And I was reporting what I was told. So we will have a further discussion about that at the next master plan meeting on the 30th. And I hope you will attend. Thank you. Okay. Digital speed signs flashing speeding along Crozet Avenue, Eugene Crozet. We discussed the digital signs this afternoon at our outdoor meeting, and I will find out from VDOT if any of those, more of those are available. They have been very, very effective in the 2 places where I've seen them installed in the county. And so that is getting people to comply in whatever ways we can are really important. And I will definitely follow up on that with VDOT to do that. The question on the list here, will the Route 29 bypass ever be built? I have not found any location where it would be useful. The last plan will not be built because it was 6 miles of roadway at 55 miles an hour, and then it brought people to a stoplight at Forest Lakes. And therefore, then they would sit at the stoplight and get right back into the same old mess. If we had spent $300 million building that 5 miles or 6 miles of high speed and also had bridges and pollution problems in our reservoir, we would not have had the money to provide the improvements on 29, the Rio interchange, the Berkmar extension, the traffic lights that are all coordinated now, the extra construction of Hillsdale Drive, and we are still in the hunt for more money from VDOT to make the final improvements at hydraulic. All 6 of those projects would never have happened if all the money had been spent on the Western bypass. So my initial answer stands is that it will not be built as was planned before. Thank you. Let's see, Emily, do we have anything in our chat? No. Okay.
No, we do not.
Wow. Have we worn everyone out? Is there anyone else who wants to call in? Have we missed anybody?
I'm not showing any hands raised. If you do want to raise your hand at this time, now would be a good time. You can also submit a, if you rate, someone is noting that chat is disabled. So if you can ask questions through the Q&A pod, and then you can also raise your hand and we will allow you to speak out loud. And if you're participating by phone, we can help direct you on how to ask a question out loud by phone, and we'll recognize you so that you can do so. So if you do have a question that you'd like to ask out loud, now would be the time to hit the raise your hand button.
And if you're on the phone, you press *9, and that will help you to get Emily's attention. All right. Well, I was worried I was talking too fast, but I guess I got through a lot of information in a short period of time.
It was amazing.
Right.
Oh, here, one.
Oh, okay, good. Do I have any comments about the tax millage if all this growth continues? All right, so I have been a believer in the long-held attitude that growth does not pay for itself. There is no way that the costs of services of a new housing unit can be covered by the taxes paid by that unit. And there have been studies every 10 years, major studies, economics schools. The first one I was involved in was in 1975 in Western Massachusetts, and we were living up there briefly after school. And they determined back then in Amherst, Massachusetts, where University of Massachusetts was, that every new unit cost the existing taxpayers $600 a year. There were 7,000 residents then, and now there are about 50,000. So you can imagine their tax rate has gone up a lot. Other people have had the short answer being, if you look at the tax rates of the most populous counties in the state, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you will see a correlation. In fact, Fairfax has over 1 million people and their tax rate's about $1.25. Arlington County has over 200,000 and their tax rate's about 96 cents. So from that perspective, I think it makes it very clear that growth does not pay for itself. It may make retailers more money and give them more customers, but it does not help the taxpayers It may help provide new jobs for our children and grandchildren, and that is always a benefit. And I'm very much in favor of supporting our local businesses to thrive and grow so that we can expand our job base for our children and people who move here. When I was going door to door in 2008, I was in a newish looking neighborhood, and I kept asking people at the door, so did you move from someplace else in the community into this nice new house, or are you new to the area? And the answer over and over again was, well, I went to Darden back in the 60s, and we all made a pact that when we all retired, we'd move back here. Or they graduated from the university. So my short answer is, we don't need to be in any magazine or book that says about the best place to live, because we graduate 6,000 future residents every single year. And they do have a way of coming back. So I know that the Census Bureau and these other people who project growth talk about how we're going to continue to grow at about 1,500 people per year, which has been the average over the last 15 years. There are some surrounding counties who have been growing at 5,000 and 7,000 people per year. Flavanna was growing at 7,000 people per year back 20 years ago. And Greene grew tremendously fast in the last couple of years. But we will continue to attract people to come. But what we don't want to do is allow all of that to happen and ruin it for people who are already here. And financially, I'm very concerned that the more children we have to educate, then that's a tremendous cost. It's a worthwhile cost, but it is still a high cost, and it has to come from somewhere. And people talk about providing affordable housing for people. Well, there's a wide range of income in Albemarle County and in the Whitehall District, and a very wide range of ability to be resilient to any kind of cost increases, which the county government lays on through increased taxes. And so I intend to remain sensitive to the fact that I have many older residents who have lived here their whole lives, worked their whole careers here, and in retirement, I want to make sure that we are not driving them away to some cheaper place when they're in their old age, because that is a cruel and heartless and rotten thing to do. So it's a very big picture. I think if we can expand the pie, the financial pie, by our economic growth and our success, and not have to rely on residential property tax to such a great degree that we do now, then that will help us to be more resilient and a better place to live for people. But it's very difficult to think about affordable housing and take money from customer A, who is of low and moderate income, and then give it to somebody else to have their house. And they say, well, what about me? You know, why are you doing that? So it's a very understandable circumstance, and we need to be sensitive to everybody in our citizenry here. So thank you. Now, was there another? Let me go back to Q&As. Where's Q&As? Oops, where'd it go? Chat, one more. Oh, sorry to miss the Ruritans. All right, Ann Chapin. That is true. I had to take the day I could to get this virtual thing done. So I will do my best to catch up with them later. Very good. All right. Well, Emily, did we find anybody else?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, I will just have a last chance. Wave your hand or jump up and down, ring the bell. Otherwise, we will say thank you and good night. And thank you so much to all the citizens who are still online. And please continue to share your ideas and concerns to me by phone or on email. And I think phone numbers can easily be obtained, or I'll just give it to you now, 434-996-6159. And my county website has the email as well. So one thing I didn't talk about was my harangue about COVID-19. And I have been very strong in support of regulation and limiting activities because of the need to keep our citizenry safe. And I implore everyone to do our part as much as we possibly can to keep each other safe. I mean, I live in a multi-generational household, so my grandchildren have not gone to school because they're afraid of what they're going to bring home to my husband and me, who are 74 and 70. And so That's a sacrifice they're making for their family. There are many other families in similar circumstances. And we all have to pitch in here. There is nobody who is untouchable, and there's nobody who is without responsibility to do our very best. And so I really call on people who are doing activities, doing group things, doing sports things, to please understand the importance of following the local rules. Yes, they're strict, and they have to be, and it's what's keeping us from completely falling apart at the moment. And I implore you to do that. I beg you to be safe and be well and enjoy, hug your family, your immediate family at Thanksgiving, and talk to everybody else on the telephone, and know that we are all in this together. And I'm terribly fond of all of you and am honored to represent you. And thank you so much for participating tonight. And thank you, Emily Kilroy, for facilitating this wonderful discussion. And as I said at the very beginning, I miss the interchange so much, and I can't wait for it to be back. So oh wait, I see 3 more questions, hold on. Oh, okay, just goodbyes, all right. Then I guess I will just cast off from the pier and float away here. So thank you, Emily, and thank you, everyone. And I guess we will adjourn our meeting.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Anne.
All right, good night, everybody. Take care.